Hello students, today we are going to start our second chapter from your book Flamingo, and the name of the chapter is Lost Spring: Stories of Stolen Childhood. This chapter is written by Anis Jung, who was born in 1964, was born in Rourkela and spent her childhood and adolescence in Hyderabad. She received her education in Hyderabad and in the United States of America. Her parents were both writers. Anis Jung began her career as a writer in India. She has been an editor and columnist for major newspapers in India and abroad, and has authored several books. The following is an excerpt from her book titled Lost Spring: Stories of Stolen Childhood. Here she analyzes the grinding poverty and traditions which condemn these children to a life of exploitation. The title Lost Spring conveys how millions of children in India lose out on living the spring of their lives. That is their childhood. The best phase of life is lost in the hardships involved to earn their livelihood. Here, in this chapter, the theme of the chapter is grinding poverty and the tradition which condemn poor children to a life of exploitation. The two stories taken together depict the plight of street children forced into labor early in life and denied the opportunity of schooling. There are two stories in this chapter, so let us begin the first story. And the title of the first story is Sometimes I Find a Rupee in the Garbage. Why do you do this? I asked Sahib, whom I encounter every morning scrounging for gold in the garbage dumps of my neighborhood. Sahib left his home long ago, set amidst the green fields of Dhaka. His home is not even a distant memory. There were many storms that swept away their fields and homes, his mother tells him. That's why they left looking for gold in the big city where he now lives. In this paragraph, scrounging it means searching for or looking for, amidst it means in the middle of. Every morning the writer sees a young rag picker boy who visits the garbage dump near her house and searches for gold in it. The writer says that he searches for gold ironically because although the garbage dump is full of useless thrown away things, still he shuffles it so minutely as if he will get something as precious as gold from it. The boy's name is Sahib. His home in Dhaka was in the middle of lush green fields. They had left it many years ago and he does not remember it anymore. His mother had told him that there were many storms which destroyed their homes and fields, so they left home and shifted to the cities in search for gold. The writer again says, looking for gold in the big city. Gold here refers to something precious which was not available in their hometown. Things like shoes, money, bags, etc. For the children, and food, clothing, shelter as means of survival for their parents, the boy searches for such precious things in the garbage dumps. One day the writer questions Sahib and asks him the reason for shuffling through the garbage. I have nothing else to do, he mutters, looking away. Go to school, I say glibly, realizing immediately how hollow the advice must sound. There is no school in my neighborhood. When they build one, I'll go. If I start a school, will you come? I ask, half joking. Here mutters it means to speak in a low voice. Glibly it means speaking or spoken in a confident way but without careful honesty. Hollow it means meaningless. Here Sahib replies to the writer that he has nothing else to do other than rag picking. The writer suggests that he should go to school. She realizes that her advice is meaningless for the poor boy. He replies that there are no schools in the area where he lives. He also assures her that he will go to school when one is built near his house. The writer asks him jokingly that if she opened a school, would he attend it? Yes, he says, smiling broadly. A few days later, I see him running up to me. Is your school ready? It takes longer to build a school, I say, embarrassed at having made a promise that was not meant. But promises like mine abound in every corner of his bleak world. Here, embarrassed it means feeling ashamed, abound it means exist in large numbers, and bleak it means empty. Sahib says that he would join the writer's school, and after a few days he runs up to her to ask whether her school is ready. The writer replied that it takes a lot of time to build a school. She felt ashamed at making a false promise. She had said this as a joke and had never intended to open a school. So she felt ashamed of herself. Sahib was not hurt because he was used to such false promises as they existed in large numbers in his empty world. He was surrounded by such false promises made by everyone around him. His world was empty as no promise made to Sahib was ever fulfilled. After months of knowing him, I ask him his name. Sahib-e-Alam, he announces. He does not know what it means. If he knew its meaning, Lord of the Universe, he would have a hard time believing it. Unaware of what his name represents, he roams the streets with his friends, an army of barefoot boys who appear like the morning birds and disappeared at noon. Over the months, I have come to recognize each of them. He would have a hard time believing it. It would be difficult for him to believe that his name meant the Lord of the Universe. Here, barefoot it means wearing nothing in the feet. Here, the writer had known Sahib for a few months. When she asked him his name, he replied as if he was making an announcement that his name was Sahib-e-Alam. The writer thought that the boy did not know the meaning of his name, and if he came to know that his name meant Lord of the Universe, he would not be able to believe it. His name was opposite to his life. He went around the streets with a group of friends. It was like an army of boys who did not wear any footwear. They appeared in the morning like the morning birds and disappeared at noon. The writer could recognize all of them as she had been seeing them for the past few months. "Why aren't you wearing chappals?" I asked one. "My mother did not bring them down from the shelf," he answers simply. In these lines, the writer asks one of them that why was he not wearing any footwear. The boy simply replied that his mother did not get them down from the shelf. As they were beyond his reach, he did not wear them. Even if she did, he will throw them off, adds another who is wearing shoes that do not match. When I comment on it, he shuffles his feet and say nothing. "I want shoes," says a third boy who has never owned a pair all his life. Traveling across the country, I have seen children walking barefoot in cities on village roads. It is not lack of money, but a tradition to stay barefoot, is one explanation. I wonder if this is only an excuse to explain away a perpetual state of poverty. Here, shuffles it means slides them over each other. Excuse it means a reason to justify a fault. Perpetual state of poverty it means never ending condition of being poor. In these lines, another boy who was wearing a different shoe in each foot said that even if his mother would have given him the footwear, he would have thrown it away. He meant that the boy was not wearing footwear because he did not want to wear one. The writer asked the second boy the reason for wearing a different shoe in each foot. He did not reply and shuffles his feet as he tried to hide the shoes. A third boy spoke that he was eager to get a pair of shoes as he had never owned one all his life. The writer takes the example of shoes to highlight the condition of these boys. They search the garbage dumps looking for such precious things. She further tells us that as she traveled across the country, she had seen many children walking barefoot in the cities as well as the villages. They reasoned that they were barefoot not due to lack of money to buy footwear, but being barefoot was a tradition for them. The writer wondered and concluded that the reason of it being a tradition was a mere excuse to hide the fact that they were so poor that they could not afford footwear. I remember a story a man from Udupi once told me. As a young boy, he would go to school past an old temple where his father was a priest. He would stop briefly at the temple and pray for a pair of shoes. 30 years later, I visited his town and the temple, which was now drowned in an air of desolation. In the backyard where lived the new priest, there were red and white plastic chairs. A young boy dressed in a grey uniform, wearing socks and shoes, arrived panting and threw his school bag on the folding bed. Looking at the boy, I remembered the prayer another boy had made to the goddess when he had finally got a pair of shoes. Let me never lose them. The goddess had granted his prayer. Young boys like the son of the priest now wore shoes, but many others like the rag pickers in my neighborhood remained shoeless. Here, desolation, it means the state of being empty. Panting, it means taking short and quick breaths. Here the writer narrates a story told to her by a man from Udupi. Udupi is a town in Karnataka. Where he was a young boy, he would walk to his school. On the way, he would cross a temple where his father worked as a priest. He would stop at the temple and pray to God to bless him with a pair of shoes. After 30 years, the writer visited the town and the temple. Now the place was nearly empty. The new priest lived in the backyard of the temple. Plastic chairs in red and white color were kept there. A young boy came running. He was wearing grey colored school uniform, socks and shoes. He had a school bag hung on his shoulders. He threw it on the bed and ran away. The writer wants to say that the financial position of the priest at the temple had improved over the last 30 years. Now he could afford shoes for his children. She was reminded of another boy who got a pair of shoes. He prayed to the goddess that he may never lose the shoes that he had got. The goddess had granted his prayer as the boy never lost his footwear. This shows us that the underprivileged value anything that they get because they have been longing for it. My acquaintance with the barefoot rag pickers leads me to Simapuri, a place on periphery of Delhi, yet miles away from it. Metaphorically, those who live here are squatters who came from Bangladesh back in 1971. Sahib's family is among them. Simapuri was then a wilderness. It still is, but it is no longer empty. In structures of mud with roofs of tin and tarpaulin, devoid of sewage, drainage or running water, live 10,000 rag pickers. Here, acquaintance, it means contact. Periphery, it means outer area. Metaphorically, it means symbolically. Squatters, it means a person who unlawfully occupies an uninhabited building or unused land. Wilderness, it means a wasteland. Tarpaulin, it means a heavy waterproof cloth. Here the writer describes the area where these rag picker boys live. Simapuri, located on the outskirts of Delhi, was very different from the capital of the country. In 1971, when these rag pickers had migrated from Bangladesh, the area had been a wasteland. Simapuri was still a wasteland, but now it was not empty as almost 10,000 rag pickers lived there, in structures made of mud with roofs made of thin sheets of tin or plastic material called tarpaulin. There was no sewage, drainage, or running water facility in Simapuri. They lived in unhygienic conditions. It was a piece of wasteland where the garbage of the city was collected. These people had started living there illegally. They have lived here for more than 30 years without an identity, without permits, but with ration cards that get their names on voters list and enable them to buy grain. Food is more important for survival than an identity. If at the end of the day we can feed our families and go to bed without an aching stomach, we would rather live here than in the fields that gave us no grain, say a group of women in tattered saris. When I asked them why they left their beautiful land of green fields and rivers. Here permits it means legal documents, tattered it means torn. The rag pickers had been living illegally in Simapuri for the last 30 years. They have occupied the area without government permission or ownership. The politicians of the area have provided them ration cards and voter identity cards. They got grocery for their family through this ration card, and in return they cast their votes in favor of the politician who had helped them. The writer asked a group of women who were wearing torn saris that why did they leave their homes in Dhaka. They replied that if they were able to satisfy the hunger of their families and sleep well at night, they were happier to live in Simapuri than their fields in Dhaka, which were ruined and gave them no food. Wherever they find food, they pitch their tents that become transit homes. Children grow up in them, becoming partners in survival, and survival in Simapuri means rag picking. Through the years, it has acquired the proportion of the fine art. Garbage to them is gold. It is their daily bread, a roof over their heads, even if it is a leaking roof, but for a child it is even more. Here, transit homes, it means a temporary home. These people traveled in search of food, and wherever they found it, they set up temporary homes and started living there. Their children kept on growing there, and gradually they also started helping their parents in seeking means of survival. For those who lived in Simapuri, the means of survival was rag picking. As they had been doing it for many years, they became trained at rag picking and did it well. For the rag pickers, the garbage was as precious as gold. These families searched the garbage dumps and got things which they sold to fund their food. They gathered torn or damaged sheets which were used to cover the roof of their homes. This did not cover them well, but still provided them with some protection. For the children, the garbage dumps were more than a means of survival. I sometimes find a rupee, even a 10 rupee note, Sahib says, his eyes lightening up. When you can find a silver coin in a heap of garbage, you don't stop scrounging, for there is a hope of finding more. It seems that for children, garbage has a meaning different from what it means to their parents. For the children, it is wrapped in wonder. For the elders, it is a means of survival. Here, lightening up, it means show joy and happiness. Sahib was happy to say that sometimes he found a rupee and even a 10 rupee note in the dump. As one often finds even a silver coin in the garbage dump, he kept on searching, hoping to find more. For the children, the garbage dumps was a means of fulfilling their dreams. Although partially, while for their parents, it was a means of aiding survival by providing the basics, food, clothing, and shelter. One winter morning, I see Sahib standing by the fenced gate of the neighborhood club watching two young men dressed in white playing tennis. I like the game, he hums, content to watch it standing behind the fence. I go inside when no one is around, he admits. The gatekeeper lets me use the swing. Here, content it means satisfied or satisfaction. One winter morning, the writer saw Sahib standing by the fence of a club. He was watching a tennis game being played by two young men. Sahib liked the game but could not play it. He told the writer that he went inside the club when it would be closed. He was allowed to take swings by the guard there. Sahib too is wearing tennis shoes that look strange over his discolored shirt and shorts. Someone gave them to me, he says in the manner of an explanation. The fact that they are discarded shoes of some rich boy who perhaps refused to wear them because of a hole in one of them does not bother him. For one who has walked barefoot, even shoes with a hole is a dream come true, but the game he is watching so intently is out of his reach. Here, discarded it means thrown away, and bother it means worry. In these lines, the writer showed that Sahib was also wearing tennis shoes that did not look appropriate with his dress, which was worn out and had faded. He told the writer in an attempt to justify himself that someone gave him the shoes. She, however, figured out that he had got them from a garbage dump. They must have been thrown away by a boy from a rich family, as he did not want to wear them anymore. Probably they had a hole or two in them, due to which he did not want to wear them. On the contrary, Sahib was not bothered by this fact and had no problem wearing them, as he could not afford anything better than that. He walked barefoot, and to wear a shoe, even with a hole, was like a dream for him. Although, due to the garbage dump, Sahib's dream of wearing shoes had been partially fulfilled, but his desire to play tennis would never be fulfilled. This morning, Sahib is on his way to the milk booth. In his hand is a steel canister. I now walk in a tea stall down the road, he says, pointing in the distance. I am paid 800 rupees and all my meals. Does he like the job? I ask. His face, I see, has lost the carefree look. The steel canister seems heavier than the plastic bag he would carry so light over his shoulder. The bag was his. The canister belonged to the man who owns the tea shop. Sahib is no longer his own master. In these lines, one morning the writer met Sahib, who was on his way to the milk booth. He was holding a steel container. He told her that he had got a job at the nearby tea stall. He would earn 800 rupees a month and get meals too. The writer asked him if he liked the job, as she could see that he had lost the carefree look. As now Sahib was working for someone else and was carrying his master's container, he was burdened with responsibility. Earlier, as a rag picker, Sahib would carry his own bag and was his own master. Now he was no longer his own master. So, students, our first part of this chapter is completed over here. Thank you.